On this episode of AV Week, joining forces between Resi and commercial, the importance of the CHIPS Act, and when AI will impact AV. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 574, recorded Friday, August 19th, 2022. AV Scars.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by
Extron, industry-leading technology backed by world-class support.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week, first and foremost, she hails from Long Island, and she is Gina Sansevero from Atlas IED. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Tim. I am always pleased to be joining you on AV Week. This is a lot of fun for me.
I appreciate it. And we got to see each other in real life
about
a week ago.
In real life with real hugs.
Yeah. Gina and I got to hang out with the rest of the PSNI marketing people, which is very cool for me because usually they stick me with the engineering folks and I just get lost. So that was a lot of fun. So
that was a lot of fun. What a unique event in our industry.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Very rarely do you get, just focusing on marketing for a couple of days with really smart people.
And believe me, we need it.
Yes, we do. Also with us is Nairi Hollingsworth, just due south, I guess, of Gina. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody's East Coast today except for me. You're Eastern time zone, Mr. McGinnis. Mr. Brock McGinnis, how are you, sir?
I'm terrific, Tim. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. Anytime. So first article actually comes to us from our friend Cindy Davis over at AV Technology and Future. She writes about how AI is transforming Pro AV, and I'm going to read a couple of quotes here from Cindy's article. One is that first of all, you've got a couple of definitions of what AI is, right? And then what some of the capabilities currently. Now it goes into a little bit of automation, which that automatically grabs me, right? Controller automation is still one of my favorite parts of the industry. But one of the things that she touches on is how AI and facial detection is being used to integrate into some of those controller automation platforms, mainly for security and for access. But the other part of that, though, is looking at AI intelligence. And one of the young men that she interviews is a friend, Rich Ventura, currently with Sony Professional Solutions. Rich has been into the AI portion of display and digital signage for a number of years, and looking how you can give a computer and a system a bulk of just basically, not basically, but a bulk of content, a bucket of content, and say, here's some parameters, now go make content as needed. And one of those ideas is a display system in, let's say, a retail location where, they're gonna market, I don't know, umbrellas and raincoats if suddenly it's raining outside, as opposed to, slacks and sandals if it's not. Those systems already exist. Gina, I'm going to start with you on this. When you look at something like this and you look at AI in general, where do you see AI heading when it comes to the industry?
So I love the concept of the AGI. That was interesting to me as I read through this article, the generalized intelligence. So essentially taking a lot of that focused intelligence, that focused data, and generalizing it to other realms of, a person's life or a retail setting or et cetera, right? One of the things that we've been talking about for a long time on the higher ed side is, wouldn't it be nice, because historically professors have lacked technological savviness, and so wouldn't it be nice for a professor to walk into a room any room on campus that's registrar owned, and have facial recognition detect that person, be able to then set all of the equipment in that room to their liking that was predetermined, right? And they don't have to touch a thing. Shades, lighting, projector or display, whatever that might be, audio settings, that is all pre-configured using their registrar ID, for lack of a better term. So, going beyond that retail application, you have a lot of different applications where you're taking the failure points of technology out of the hands of the people that usually have that struggle.
And that absolutely can happen, right? Because you're able to connect and coordinate between either single sign-on and their face, as well as coordinating with whatever control platform you're using. Nairi, same question here. Is you're looking at Nairi spent a lot of time in corporate, Fortune 500, Fortune 100. Where do you see AI fitting in here?
Similar use cases. I don't deal with professors as much, but I do deal with executives that, are struggle just as much to get these systems up and running. And I would imagine have a little bit shorter patience when it doesn't work exactly how they want to. So I see the promise in, the holy grail and the white whale that I've been chasing for the past few years is that zero touch meeting experience where you just walk in and sit down and, the systems already know who you are and they can launch your meeting based on your Outlook calendar invite. And get the system tuned and configured, to the settings of the individuals in the room. And I'm talking dynamically adjusting cameras, dynamically adjusting microphones to suit the number of people that are in the room, to give you that truly immersive experience that is really hard to do with the current way that we are able to manipulate this technology. And I'm optimistic that I see, a lot of these technologies converging, especially as you start to intersect this data with a lot of the other data that's available to you from a building automation perspective, and allow these systems to really just go on their own in a lot of ways. I don't think you're going to get rid of like your support technicians and things of that nature, because obviously this stuff isn't going to work 100% of the time. But to the extent that we can get it working, in this case, 50% of the time, I think that's a huge win.
Do you, really quickly, Nairi, before I get on to Brock, do you think the zero touch is an extension of COVID, an extension of the pandemic, or do you think it was moving that direction anyway before 2020?
I was thinking that way before 2020, and I think that's where that technology was heading even prior to the pandemic. It's just the pandemic in a lot of ways and accelerated a lot of these efforts and gave us a little bit more courage to be risky and actually try them out in our environments, because we're definitely not looking at going backwards. So what is that next thing, and what can we use and try out to get us to that next level?
Brock, sorry, go ahead. Where do you see this? And is this something that we were already heading down, or accelerated by COVID?
I don't think there's any question. What Nairi said, that we want the user to have as little input into messing up the systems that we give them, and they've had this great experience at home for a couple of years. And at home, they've got a fixed system. It's always the same. They click that one join button, and everything's right. The microphone is set for them. The camera is set for them. So, whether that's AI or whether that's just programming, AI to me is a series of if-then commands and programming with a bunch of databases behind it. And the deeper the database, and the more accurate the if, the more accurate the then. But I'm also terrified by it. I don't know if you recall, Tim, but the last time we recorded this show, not only was my internet provider on a national outage, but that was the day that my bank froze all of my accounts because some computer with AI detected what they perceived to be fraudulent activity across my bank accounts. And I could not reactivate it without walking into a branch and spending about 2 hours attempting to physically validate who I was and what those transactions were, which is just insane. So that kind of AI, I don't need. Facial recognition is a hot, steaming mess because I think it was developed by people that look like me, and it doesn't do well with people that look like Nairi or people that look, different than me. And so, the worst thing that we can do is tell people, I'm going to give you a self-driving car and then have it kill other folks on the road because it just doesn't work quite right. So, in audiovisual, I don't think it's unfair for a user to press a button that says join, but that there is some intelligence behind the individual who's operating the meeting or the classroom and having their parameters automatically follow from that. And it doesn't have to be facial recognition. It can be an RFID. It can be a fingerprint. It can be just a passcode on their, with two-factor on their cell phone. But AI is a very two-edged sword until it adds the general intelligence that Gina was speaking about.
All right. Next comes to us from Commercial Integrator. I stumbled a little bit here because it certainly could have been written in Commercial Integrator's sister publication, CE Pro. And that is because it was written by Amanda Wildman. Amanda is a member of the board for CEDIA, the residential version, the residential organization that kind of a little bit like Avixa. They do some things differently, but certainly they cover and support the residential arm of the AV industry. And Amanda writes, should commercial and residential integrators partner up? Now, before Brock throws something at me through the screen, let me explain where I got this. Number one, Amanda makes a couple really good points. And Brock, you kind of said this a little bit. Folks have been in their house for 2 years, right? They have been using, you can call it resi-mercial, right? Or prosumer devices for 2 years. And they're slowly getting back into the workplace, but there's still a good percentage of folks that are going to be hybrid, meaning they're going to be in the office where our folks all live, and then they're going to be home where Amanda and Cedia live. So the question here is, you've got work from home, you've got some similar technologies, sure as heck, and AVNation is headed to Cedia in about a month or so. There are going to be plenty of dealer or of vendors there who will have booths who are also at Infocom, right? So there is some crossover here. Nairi, as you're reading this, and Nairi, again, lives in Fortune 500 here, but as you're reading this, does this make sense where resi and commercial, at least here in the States, and I say that as a caveat, because in large parts of Europe, they don't care. AV is AV, right? They'll put it in anywhere. But here in the States, we've certainly segmented ourselves. So does that make sense to you, where maybe if you get two dealers together and say, I'll take care of the houses, you take care of the conference rooms?
Yeah, I think there's some opportunity there for sure. Because I vividly remember just 2 years ago, as the pandemic was, going much longer than any of us were anticipating, having conversations with my leadership about how do we put together a kit for our executives that they could use and set up in their house and make it simple, but yet effective for them to do similar conversations like this, podcasts and presentations, but also, just a regular all hands meeting with their teams. Because we've all seen those news broadcasts that happen from people's homes over the past year and a half. And you would expect that someone that was making as much or as famous as person X would have a much better setup. And they just really didn't have that expertise and knowledge to buy the right equipment and put it in the right places and set up the acoustics and environments in their homes to really make it production ready. So I think there's an opportunity for those on the commercial side to offer that level of expertise to those on the residential side. Is it via partnership? Is it via acquisition? I don't know. There's probably a healthy mix either way. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see more commercial integrators getting into that kind of residential space simply because their clients, have executives that need spaces that, for all intents and purposes, operate just as efficiently and effectively as their offices, as their corporate offices.
All right. Brock, same kind of question here. Where do you see this falling, and where do you see this heading between the residential part of some commercial grade stuff in people's homes, pushing their way into commercial side?
There are two different kinds of service organizations, and I believe that this was actually brought forward in the article. The kind of people that know construction or know how to work in the corporate environment with a professional IT team don't necessarily know how to work in a residential environment and with a family. And they certainly don't know how to support them after 5 o'clock. And have organizations that are designed. I don't think it's about the technology anymore, because I think the technology is very similar. Any good CEDIA contractor can install a good home office video conferencing setup. I have no question about that. Can a commercial contractor like myself support a family and their network and their media and their gaming and their streaming at 11:30 at night when in the middle of a party it goes down? No, not especially well. And I learned that the hard way. In fact, I think that's where this scar came from, and maybe that one. That it's just really tough.
All right, Gina, as a manufacturer, where do you see some of this? And I mentioned this. Atlas has been at CEDIA in the past. I don't believe you guys are there this year, but you have exhibited in the past for various reasons, right? I mean, not only does Atmosphere fit a lot of Atmosphere is their audio distribution platform that fits a lot in what Resi folks are doing in hospitality and stuff like that. But you also have other products as well. Are you guys seeing some of this crossover, or what are you seeing when it comes to some of either the commercial folks trying to support folks, their clients' home offices, or the opposite side of that, some residential folks trying to, improve people's home offices?
Yeah, so maybe I'm just short-sighted, but this specific article confused me a bit. I don't know why you would want to partner with a residential integrator. They have a lot of access to the equipment that's going to work best in homes, even from a video conferencing setup. Those who are working from homes don't want our black magic black boxes. They don't want the complexity. They want to be able to sit down, get up and running in 5 minutes, because you know what? Their kids are going to be running in the next half hour for lunch, and they need to be up and running as quickly as possible. There's a reason why we have prosumer products. They have high quality, but also intuitive interfaces, right? So that was a little bit confusing to me. The other thing that was a little bit confusing to me was the messaging and the language is so completely different when you're talking to a consumer who is a residential person versus that IT or AV person who's working in corporate higher ed, whatever vertical you're working in, right? And so why confuse sales? Why confuse marketing? I don't believe that there's a need for necessarily that partnership. And I think there's a huge value and huge power of partnerships within our industry. But this one just confused me a bit. But I'll tell you where I see the overlap. The overlap that I see is I have a friend working on a very big renovation of a 30-something floor New York City building. And it was originally a corporate building that is now being used as multi-million-dollar condos. They brought in a commercial AV consultant to be able to outfit the entire building, including automations for the pool that's on the 20-something floor, right? To be able to integrate all of the systems. That complexity was necessary. That's considered a residential building, but the level of complexity of that installation, of that technology deployment was such that, and as complicated to be a commercial deployment, and they needed that. So, and don't get me wrong, for the individual condo units, they had an interface to a residential integrator that would then be able to say, okay, this type of interface is necessary because the intuitiveness works for this client base, right? So I see that working, but that's a very few and far between type of a situation.
Yeah, those are specialists actually that do straddle, that do what's called the MURB, M-U-R-B business, and for years I've done condo building amenity spaces, the public spaces, party rooms, gyms, meeting facilities, and whatnot. Won't touch the individual condo. Just because of some of the things that you brought forward.
And it's been said to me more than once. One of my dear friends, Rich Fregosa, who's been doing residential for 30 years, is like, you know what? In corporate, you're selling to a board. In residential, you're selling to people's hearts, right? And there's emotion tied to that, right? There's a whole level of complexity. Whether that's the wife or the husband that's really tuned into it. One of them is rather emotionally attached to the look and feel of the technology. So, alrighty, last story actually comes from me. I wrote it. 4 ways that the CHIPS Act is going to help AV, and really quickly, this is my synopsis of a humongous piece of U.S. legislation. Roughly $52 billion is going into semiconductor production. Congress passed it about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It has been in and around the U.S. for about 2 or 3 years. And the idea here originally was to bring semiconductor production to the states because of defense, quite frankly. The U.S. government and the Department of Defense said, oh, hey, wait a minute. We can't make chips, which means we can't make fighter jets or anything else. Well, maybe there's a revolver out there that doesn't involve a chip, but that's probably about it, right? And I'm being somewhat facetious, but the Department of Defense pretty much runs on computers now, right? So what that does, though, is that and it's going to be a minute, right, kids? It takes about 3 years and a couple $1 billion to make one of these foundries. So it's not tomorrow. But it does alleviate some pressure on the other ones, which is where this comes in my head, right? Where you've got Taiwan or China or Korea, which are currently kind of the hotbeds of production for everybody, including AV. If the U.S. government says, you know what, we're going to take some of those defense ones back, which, let's be frank, the U.S. government's going to put pressure on any factory making chips for them and say, you're going to do ours first. I don't care how many AV components you screw. I need my fighter jet, right? So there's that. And they're going to bring that home, so that means that alleviates some of the pressure. There's some other reasons. You can read that. But Brock, I'm going to start with you. Granted, it wasn't a Canadian bill, but it is certainly going to help AV up north. Do you see some of the logic here, or am I out of my tree when I say that this legitimately will eventually help us in the supply chain issue?
I think it will help the world, Tim, and I think that it's long overdue to start just turning back the pages of time to when America made things. So you will not hear me say very much good about your previous president. But the one thing that he did do immediately, day one, is he said, we need to get steel production back in the hands of Americans. And Canada has done much of the same thing because we can't make those fighter jets or tanks or anything else without steel, and we've offshored our steel. We've offshored, so much of how we live through just this incessant kind of onrush of globalization. I believe that a major industrial nation like America needs very much to be in control of its own economy and its own means of production, and that certainly includes chips.
All right, Gina, as a manufacturer who does rely on chips, let's not be coy here. Atlas certainly does. What does something like this mean to you guys?
So, I mean, clearly a number of years out, right? It doesn't take a chip manufacturing plant does not pop up overnight like your tomato plant, right? So, not going to happen anytime soon, but has huge repercussions for our industry in the future. Atlas IED has already started bringing manufacturing to the U.S. We never lost our plants in Phoenix and Ennis. We have doubled down on the amount of investment that we have in new machinery. So we have three or four new machines in Ennis, with another few coming. So we have new machinery coming in, and this is all to supplement that industrialization or reindustrialization of the United States. We're using our existing facilities. There are a lot of places in the United States that have that NIMBY mentality, right? Like, not in my backyard. I don't want to see it here. We're going to run into that a lot. So wonderfully, we have our own plants, and we will be leveraging those facilities and expanding them as necessary, because where we have some of our plants, there is room for expansion. Which is wonderful. And then, from a manufacturer's standpoint, again, I think that what we'll find is that over the next few years, as people start asking the government for more money and more support, funding, I think, will eventually continue to evolve. And so right now they're talking about however many billions that they're putting into it, and it probably takes more than that to make a few chip plants. But this is seed money legitimately, and so what we're seeing is the start of a wave of a new manufacturing identity for America. And I think, to Brock's point, the availability worldwide from a different type of supplier, it's going to be really cool to watch this evolve.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the record, Gina mentioned the plant in Ennis, Texas. If you ever end up in Ennis, Texas, go by Bubba's Barbecue. Trust me, you can write me a thank you letter later. Holy cow. All right. Nairi, same question here. What does this do for the folks on the front lines of AV when we look at, hopefully bettering and streamlining the chip supply, I guess is the best way to put that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat too much here, but I wholeheartedly agree with both Brock and Gina that, this is a very, very good thing for America and America's economy, with the jobs that are going to be created because of this, but also the speed to market that we will enable. And also, I am optimistic that there will be a certain level of innovation that will also be enabled, as well as, you got more entrepreneurial minds with better access to raw materials to make these things a reality. And so I'm very hopeful of what this is to come. I think it's actually we're gonna start to see benefits of it sooner than 3 years. I think a year and a half from now, you'll start to see some of the seeds of this start to bear fruit, so to speak. And then after that, I fully expect America to do what America does, and put out great products that actually change the world. And so I think this is one of the best things, one of the best pieces of legislation that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm definitely hopeful that we get our act together, so to speak, with respect to keeping this level of production at home and providing opportunities for unskilled labor to really contribute to the economy.
I kind of have a question to that end. From an economic standpoint, are we ready to pay more for these components?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm doing it right now today because of, just
sure.
being able to, because I have deadlines and projects that need things, and the things that I would normally buy are not available. So I am paying more. Don't particularly like that I am paying more. But we are paying more to get these products because they meet the deadline, not necessarily because they're better, but they meet the deadline. And that's what the name of the game is right now. And that's how it's going to be, at least for the next year and a half. I'm putting that flag in the ground. It's going to be a year and a half before I think we're out of this supply chain mess. And so, yeah, if you want product, you got this nice fancy building that you want to come up at a certain point in time, you can't really be picky with the products that you have, in the marketplace.
And one thing I would say is, I don't know that we will feel it as Americans initially. And the reason I say that is because I mentioned the Department of Defense. They're the ones who are going to be, it's their budget. We're used to paying or spending a lot of money. I'm not going to give an adjective, but between $600 and $800 million on a yearly basis to the Department of Defense. They're the ones that'll feel it first. Then yes, they will probably raise our taxes and then we'll feel it. But to Nairi's point, folks that are needing it right now, they're paying, right? I've heard several stories of chips being on the gray or even black market that are going for astronomical, like anything from a $50 chip going for $1,000 or $5,000 a piece, right? Depending on what chip it is and what it is you need it to do. So yeah, he's right. We're paying for it now already. So yeah. All right, that will do it for us. Thank you all so much. Gina Sansevero from Atlas IED. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tim. This was a great group, and I always love to be on with you.
Well, thank you. How do people connect with you or Atlas IED?
AtlasIED.com is our website. You can find me on Twitter at Gina Sands or at Atlas_IED. Holy cow. And also on LinkedIn and Instagram, but it's mostly food and puppies.
This is accurate, actually. And Gina mentioned, tomato plants popping out of the ground. Once a year, she makes like a ginormous thing of spaghetti sauce. So you should follow her on Instagram just for those.
That is next weekend. We will be doing our Tomato Day next weekend. And yes, we will have a bunch of sauce on Instagram.
I'm just saying I will be in New York in October. So.
Okay. We will put some aside for you.
All right, Nairi, how do people connect with you, sir?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Nairi Hollingsworth, or on the Twitters. I am at Nairi H. Thank you so much for having me, Tim. A lot of fun.
Good to see you. Mr. McGinnis, always, I learn something every time I talk to you. So thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate you having me back. Great conversation today. Very upbeat fellow panelists and good people. So keep it up, sir.
Alrighty. For Tim Albright, on the don't follow me on the Twitters because I am officially cautiously optimistic about the Bears season. I'll put it that way. Cautiously. It's preseason, kids. It doesn't mean a darn thing in football. I'm sorry. Doesn't mean anything in baseball either, or hockey for that matter.
Let's go Mets.
Yeah, whatever.
Go Braves. That's what you meant to say?
I would just like to point out that the Cardinals have more World Series than both of them put together, but that's beside the point.
Who's the current World Series champion?
Not the Cardinals.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, not the Cardinals. But go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You will find this program, a host of others. I mentioned Cedia. Our buddy Matt Scott records AVWeek and covers the residential market. You'll also find our fantastic sponsors, people like Atlas IED, the folks that help us bring you AVWeek. and Rising Week, and a whole lot more. Programming note: by the time you hear this, listen to this, I will be in Chicago. If you are in Chicago and you are an end user of some sort, you're an IT manager, you're an in-house integrator, come join me for an event on Monday afternoon in Chicago. If you go to the website, there is a new bright blue button that says Fuse. That is our AV and IT manager group. So click on that. You can register for the event. We will also have one coming up in New York. I wasn't kidding about October. We're having one in New York as well as one in Southern California. I'll just say by the end of the year. So how about that? So all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That is all the time we have for AV Week.